Could you imagine playing an MMORPG for nearly a whole year without ever cracking open your wallet? Especially one that is as highly rated and storied as Final Fantasy XIV. Well, over the past year, I've put about 400 hours into their extended free trial.
I gotta pump those numbers up. Those are rookie numbers in this racket.
I did not think I was even going to enjoy this game when I started, but here we are, about to dive into their third expansion, Shadowbringers, and actually pay for the subscription. And I do so happily. But let me tell you what changed my mind about this game. As a note, spoilers all the way up through the end of Stormblood throughout. So after all the long years of me playing World of Warcraft and paying a monthly sub for the game, I swore that I was done subscription-based MMO again. That's what attracted me to Guild Wars 2 for the longest time, because I had that game purchased already and it didn't cost me anything to keep playing. After some convincing of mine, a friend, Galactic, encouraged me to try out Final Fantasy XIV on their free trial. Some of the services about the game, of course, being blocked on the free trials, such as like inviting people to a group or using the market board and having a level cap of level 70. I figured there really wasn't any way that I was going to stick with the game for that long. So I started as a warrior in the pirate capital of Limsa Lominsa, and the first 10 hours were a bit slow and cheesy at that. I mean, funny looking characters, weird plot threads, deep V's everywhere. It was a goofy mess. I know that's a bit harsh, but bear with me. I have fallen in love with this game. I originally made a video talking about my new player experience, and I was like, this game is accidentally hilarious. I think they're trying to be serious, but oh man, I'm cracking up at this. So why would I even bother with the free trial, let alone considering paying money for a monthly sub? Well, allow me to share deeper into the story of my Final Fantasy XIV experience. Opinions are hard to change. When someone has a thought or feeling, especially about a video game or an outside perspective of that game, it's hard to convince them to try it out and let alone enjoy it. Preconceptions are a very real thing, and before I even tried 14, I had the thought that it was a weeb game. Cat ears, ridiculously fit tall women, anime, I mean, that was my original thought, and I was incredibly wrong. Like, not even close. My big problem that I had before I even started 14 was that I had such a negative perspective of the game, mainly due to tribalism. It ultimately ended up being a culmination of what I was told from multiple World of Warcraft groups that I was a part of. Playing WoW for so many years kind of gave me an elitist mindset, actually a very poor one, that I had to shun and look down other MMOs as lesser or copies of the WoW model, which was the golden standard. For the longest time, tribalism is what really affected me. It simply was, my team is better than your team because I believe it is better than your team. You see this in sporting teams and events, anything that has competition really. And honestly, when I was doing this and I formed my opinion of Final Fantasy XIV before I played it, this was like the early 2010s, and where WoW was basically a massive juggernaut. Not 100% a fair comparison, if I'm to be honest, but the one that I did nonetheless. After I started content creation back nearly 3 years ago, I decided that I would focus on MMOs that I had played on the side, and the one that I really stuck with was Guild Wars 2. I eventually needed to branch off and get other types of gameplay, and this led me to Lord of the Rings Online, Path of Exile, and such, until I finally listened to Galactic and tried out Final Fantasy XIV, that much you know. I created my first video, and it was so warmly received by so many Final Fantasy XIV players that I decided to keep pulling on the thread, creating a couple more videos recapping what was happening during the MSQ and my experiences and my thoughts. Into the early levels, which was over a brief time, I garnered a large dedicated following of people who wanted to see my journey. But that was not even the craziest part about this. I was actually really starting to like the story and the game. I even had a favorite character early on in Papa Meow, or Papa Limu, who you would probably know better, but I nicknamed him Papa Meow, and that's another story. I decided to start streaming Final Fantasy XIV, and I had so many people show up to wish me warmly on my journey and hope that I continue on with the story because it does get better. Now, typically the combat of a game is what really draws me in, and honestly, to start Final Fantasy XIV was insanely slow. I made note of this throughout most of Base Realm Reborn. It was just inching along. It takes so long for you to get the appropriate skills to pick up speed, and eventually it does. I will admit it does, but it took so long. I held out hope, however, riding the excitement of the story and what was going on around me up until a specific moment in the MSQ. Prior to this, I thought that this was going to be your simple trajectory increasing, good adventurer rises to defeat big bad guys. And this was true until the Garleans invaded the Waking Sands, killing many of the Scions. It was such an unseen dagger that absolutely took me by surprise. That was the first hook. That had me basically questioning everything I had seen up until this point. Absolutely brutal. And then it almost became personal. Now we even have a bigger reason to fight and continue on. After a few more weeks of progressing and streaming, working on my warrior, gearing up and all that, I get to the end of A Realm Reborn, of the story fighting La Habrea, the Ultima Weapon, and of course Gaius. It was such a satisfying end to this story, although a little bit cheesy with the anime charge against La Habrea. But that was only the start. The post A Realm Reborn content was ridiculous. Not only the size of the patches, but including basically a new primal fight each and every patch, but the Coils of Bahamut, which by every measure was the moment I knew I was going to love this game. Seeing the story of what had happened to Louisoix and how Bahamut was simply a primal who was kept alive by the anguished cries of the dragons of Mercadia, I believe it's Mercadia, it was fantastic. This leads up to the epic fight against Bahamut Prime, and then cues the A Realm Reborn trailer music. Blasting, and it just makes it feel so epic. Beyond belief. Holy crap, that was so good. Even though it was unsynced and Galactic and I were just easily cruising through it, it was such a good story for me to see and to be a part of. And not only that, seeing what happened to Louisoix and how he stopped Bahamut, it was incredible. Well, this gave me the drive to want to dig further, see more challenging content and where this story goes. Then another dagger moment, the bloody banquet. Where do I even begin? The shock, the betrayal, the complete flip of the coin where we were the heroes up until 10 minutes ago, and then we were betrayed by the Crystal Braves, Telegi Adeleji, and Lola Rito. It was like one of those moments where it was like, what the hell? We had so much shock dealing with the damn primal summons and trying to wrestle Eorzea into some kind of stability, and then it was just all over the damn place. And then what added on to this was the culmination of the Heavensward cinematic, where it was truly just awesome. I really started paying attention to the music here. The songs, the lyrics, the words, everything that was tied to these, it added an extra layer that just was peak, absolute peak. I mean, Bahamut's tune was of course great, but the Heavensward music was just perfect. I took this time in the background to work on my Dragoon and have it ready for Heavensward. I like the idea of going through each one of the expansions and changing my job to match whatever expansion I'm, whatever role I'm going through. Since I went through Warrior on A Realm Reborn, it seemed kind of like smart, the coolest option for Heavensward to be a Dragoon, and let me just say, it did not disappoint. It was so damn fun. Not only that, you get to meet Estinian beforehand, which he's a great character, especially learning some history of him and who the dragons are and who the dragoons are. Well, we get through a good chunk of Heavensward, and it does make sense, trying to chase down Askian shenanigans and discovering the terrible history of the Holy See, only to be met with an absolute face punch in the vault. Throughout our journey in Heavensward expansion, and even before then, we had a close friend in Harchenfall, who at first I was like, this is the broest bro ever. I thought he was pretty cool. I thought he was just like a background character, really didn't do anything like that, until I was told that he is absolutely flirting with us this entire time, and apparently is super duper aggressive in other countries, which I found hilarious. I thought he was just like this big bro until I actually heard him speak, and then he had like a higher pitched voice than I was expecting, I'll be honest with you. Well, we fight to the top of the vault, chasing down the Ishgard Pope and his buddies, because it turns out that they are in fact the bad guys here. Well, at the end, Harchenfont, who became like one of our best friends, ends up taking a light spear through the chest to prevent us from dying. We watch our friend brutally die in our arms, and it is abysmal. Like, terrible, because despite everything else he was, he believed that we were the hero. He believed in us. We gave him strength. Alfie tries his best to heal him, but it wasn't enough. And then right after a moment that just absolutely broke me was Giga Chad Edmund literally saying my son. And that was like his first time acknowledging that his technically bastard son was his actual heir, and it was terrible. The Heavensward journey continued, and it ended up being more about vengeance as we break into Azizla, hunting down La Habrea and Pope Thordan, only for him to use the Dragon's Eye, become a primal, and slay La Habrea. Like, yo dog, I called dibs on him. He's been like our enemy since day one. Come on now. This moment was really, really cool. But all that stuck in my head, and does still to this day continue to stick into my head, is the music. The music for King Thoradin's fight is absolutely one of the best soundtracks in the game. Untouched. I still play it every now and then just to listen because I get like goosebumps, man. It's so good. Well, the post-Heavensward stuff was fun, especially the Alexander raid that I thoroughly enjoyed, especially the mechanics and kind of like the story of it. It was a lot of fun. Galactic then later showed me the Epic of Alexander fight, which holy hell, like that's so cool. Like that's an extra layer that is just epic. But at this point, I have now been streaming Final Fantasy XIV every Monday and Friday at 9:15 for nearly 6 months. I have been enjoying this game so much just due to its story and of course the raiding and the combat, which has picked up and has become one of my favorite things about this game, but it really didn't prepare me for how Stormblood was going to be, which took it up to another level. The post-Heavensward story, Dragonsong, had of course its epic ending of a fight between us and Nidhogg, which to this day I have yet to do the extreme on mine difficulty because I like that fight was intense and we wiped for like 2.5 hours. Regardless, that fight was so damn fun. It was such a good capstone to the story. Really did do an amazing job of tying everything up with a nice little bow, save for a couple of Dragon's Eyes, which of course led us to the Warriors of Darkness plot thread, which I was hammering on them, the Warriors of Darkness, only to find out that they were literally heroes who made all the right choices, who did everything right, and they still suffered from a calamity. Like, they still suffered from the end of their world because the light became too powerful, which was absolutely wild. This was a point that I had to put my foot in my mouth because I seriously showed me how much even being right and noble thing can be detrimental to the world. Well, this leads us to the Griffin, which as soon as I hear his voice, immediately I knew that it was Ilbert. I called it out. And everyone in chat doubted me and was like gaslighting the hell out of me, but I had a feeling that Final Fantasy doesn't really let these loose plot threads go. So we progress up and fight through Baelsar's wall, and we finally see the final fight against the Griffin, because of course this asshat can just let anything be the status quo. He has to stir up trouble and force our hands in an all-out war against the Garleans. What a jerk. Feral amigo. Well, the double Dragon's Eyes he pulls out of his prison pocket wasn't all that surprising because we saw that he got them, but he literally unalived himself to summon Shinryu, which was like a huge what the fuck moment. And this became one of the more somber points in the story, in my story here. I called it from a long time before, and I don't think that Yida and Papa Meow were ever going to make it through all of the story, which I was technically right on both accounts. Papa Meow sacrificed himself to bind Shinryu so we could formulate a plan, which honestly, I had such a bad feeling that that was going to happen. Something bad was going to happen just because we hadn't seen Papa Meow for a while, we hadn't seen Yida for a while, and then they all of a sudden show up in this Alamigo type thing. I don't know. I knew it was going to happen. It stung watching him sacrifice himself, but he went out in such an epic way. Like, ah, man. I rolled a Black Mage for Stormblood and carried on his title, the finest pupil's ally, for the entire time. And technically, Yida did die because it became Lys. Yida was never really a person. So I was right on that. Another thread that I had forgotten for Final Fantasy XIV was the Cartano Flats and Omega, which hides beneath. Earlier on, Teleji Adeleji was trying to assume like a control over the Cartano Flats. And of course, when he's trying to do that, he wants the Omega weapon, which you know he wasn't going to either be A, able to control, or B, even going to be able to find out and work on. We don't know what he was going to do, but we didn't want to give him the chance. But we had to go and find Omega to fight Shinryu because apparently he was way too powerful. Well, Nero helped us out, and this is all still hilarious just because of the divorced energy with Nero and Sid Bob Me Boy. It was hilarious. Well, this all ends in a massive climactic battle and spurs on the beginning of Stormblood. Many people have told me that Stormblood is one of the weakest expansions story-wise, that it was not the strongest point in comparison to like Heavensward and other expansions. But honestly, I actually really enjoyed it. And I did for quite a few reasons, but the big one for me was the combat difficulty. The story does take some great turns of us like an Alamigo and making way with the resistance and then getting absolutely obliterated by Xenos and his gang. Good God, that was a brutal moment too. It kind of felt reminiscent of the moment back at the Waking Sands. Like, it was just such a punch to the face, and we were making progress, and now it's like it completely decimated. And of course, the story takes a slightly different turn, and we go to create some resistance in Doma along with our buddies Gotsetsu and Yugiri. And yeah, let's be serious, Gotsetsu is the man. And then, of course, the entrance of Hot Cross Buns Lord Hien, and us earning the trust of the peoples of the Azim Steppe. I mean, it was really, really cool. It had a bunch of really good points. Overarching pain of occupied territory of the Garleans and the people basically being in this like war-torn slavery type thing. It was really terrible like instances. It was so well portrayed that I feel like a lot of people don't give Stormblood enough credit for how well of a picture it paints. Well, we progress through the land, gathering up all the allies and defeating the acting viceroy of Yatsuyu, and we get the end climactic battle against her roid rage bodyguard Namesday, only to have the castle to fall on the goat. And it was sad, which at that time it was very, very sad, because I was like, Gotsetsu's been with us since like day one. We defeated her, but at what costs? I really actually hated this part of the story because the man is literally holding up a castle and he gets shot like 3 times. Like, come on, why you got to do him? Out of anyone, him like that? Well, the resistance grows in other parts of the world and inspires the Eorzean Alliance to start progressing into Alamigo against Xenos, and we convince the locals as well as some beastmen to join the assault, which is cool. I like that this was a culmination moment where everyone was coming together to push the Garleans out, push out this like infection. Oh man. And then we get into the final fights against Xenos, and this big boy Xenos, this dump truck Xenos is a beautiful psycho. I've talked about this a number of times, but having a character who is unapologetically evil is such a boon in games nowadays. So many villains have such like this like torn background, like this gray area background where it's like they were abused, they were neglected, they were tortured or something like that, and that caused them to be evil. But I liked Xenos because he was just straight up insane. Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, evil. I am evil for the sake of evil. Like, uncaring, unflinching, which I absolutely love. I actually draw a comparison of Big Jack Horner from the most recent Puss in Boots movie, The Last Wish. Just, he's evil. That's just, there's no question. He's just a villain and selfish. There you go. Well, we best him, and then we rush out back of the Alamigo castle, only to find that he has Shinryu tied up, and he basically merges with him now. Now we have to fight a Xenos rage-filled dragon in our backyard. This fight was absolutely, without a doubt, one of the best fights in the game that I have had thus far. It truly has all sorts of great, wonderful elements. I mean, we're talking fast mechanics, DPS checks, real-time action maneuvers, dragons, Xenos' cake. Oh my goodness, what more could you want? It was insanely good. Well, he is satisfied. And then he does, of course, the absolute unthinkable and unalives himself right then and there because he knew that he had peaked. It was downhill from there. And that was like one of those moments that, like, imagine being that level of insane for that to happen. That was crazy to me. Well, we do get the ending cutscene and everyone sings along, but then we find that Gotsetsu is alive and Yatsuyu is with him, and they are just like teaming up and wandering around together. The Stormblood Alliance raids of Ivalice they were pretty fun. I liked a lot of their fights as they were kind of difficult and offered a challenge, but in my mind, Omega was just perfect. Chef's kiss. I love that the fights were challenging, but the music was great. And then when you ended up doing the fight on Savage difficulty, they each had like their own unique transition, which was absolutely incredible. Such good work. The flair to the fight makes it feel like it's much more epic than like the normal version. It was so good. And honestly, it kind of makes me want to go back and try them on Savage Synced, because hot damn, they were great. Well, the post-Stormblood patches do a very nice job of ending the story for us in Alamigo and giving Raubon his right to leave to come back to his hometown, as well as leading the Alamegans with Lise. And of course, nothing ever stays quiet because a Garlean emissary shows up after we found Gotsetsu and Yatsuyu trying to broker peace, but this guy is actually rightfully named Asshat, and he's a giant Xenos fan, and he is, without a doubt, like, hates the Warrior of Light because he's like, there's no way that he could have beat him. he lied or he cheated or something. I don't know. He has a really punchable face. Well, we find out that he's untrustworthy and he basically trauma lapses Tsuyu back into Yatsuyu, and she goes full primal rage with this one in one of the most elegant and graceful fights I've ever seen. I died multiple times, but it was amazing, bar none. Well, Yatsuyu kills her brother with her last little bit of energy, and we're kind of left saying, what the hell? Because now we just found out that Xenos is alive somehow, which I immediately called and said that he got rezzed by someone or something. I don't know. The story catapults to where we are now. The Scions have been called, which basically sucks their souls out of their body and leaves them nothing but husks. And the Garleans are ramping up for a full-scale invasion, which honestly, this has turned south so damn fast that I'm needing to catch my breath. Holy crap. The most interesting character from this whole charade, that is one of the newest ones that we've just been introduced, Solus Zos Galvus, who is Xenos' great-grandfather, Varys' grandfather, but his body is actually possessed by the Askian Emmett Selch, which I don't know what's going to happen, but this has been an insane year that I'm able to just nearly reiterate this entire story without looking anything up. This was all free spoken, talked just off the memory. That is how important this game has been to me. So playing Final Fantasy for a year has done quite a bit to my mentality and focus on playing games. Part of the reason I enjoyed Guild Wars 2 for so long is that the combat was fast and the story really wasn't as momentous. I didn't need to really pay attention to what I was doing, mainly because it always kind of worked itself out in the end. Getting to max level and pushing through some like endgame stuff was always enjoyable. I could kind of turn my brain off. Now, 14 has me reading each storyline, trying to digest each plot thread, and really paying attention to my surroundings. It has me much more invested in characters and places in this story that I don't know necessarily if I would typically do if I hadn't experienced Final Fantasy 14 and seen the value of understanding a good backstory. My favorite characters, for the most part, have gone full Game of Thrones and been deleted, but it doesn't mean that I don't enjoy the others' presence or their part in that specific timeline. It makes it so much more special, like you could not believe, because, well, you don't know if your character is going to make it all the way to the end, but you still cling to them anyway. It's really a fun instance. Now, I know that this experience is basically from a brand new player's view, but there are many, many great moments in this game, and I haven't even begun to dig into all the non-main story elements that all have their own unique stories and plot threads. It's really, really incredible for me to realize that this game is so worth the time that you put into it. Albeit, my experience is definitely a little bit different from other players because, well, I have this community. The community here in Final Fantasy is hands down the reason that I have stuck with this game for so long, and I'll be 100% honest. It is easily one of the things that I look forward to every time I log into stream, is catching up with the people that I normally see, telling them stories about my day or my week, or just to hang out. Even my Discord here in 14 has brought many new and engaging people that I have the honor and privilege of speaking to on almost a daily basis. It's incredibly humbling to see how far I've come with such a following at my back. It really does make me appreciate how this journey has coalesced and where it will go from here. I have thoroughly enjoyed my time here in Final Fantasy XIV, and as I'm about to start progressing into Shadowbringers, I am more than excited to get into the story and the other features of the game that I have now paid the sub for, and I'm off of the free trial. Absolutely, it is worth the time that you will put into this game because it does pay off in the end. I look forward to each time I log in. I thank you for hanging out and listening to my story of Final Fantasy XIV. And if you want to see my complete A Realm Reborn experience, including all my MSQ recaps, you can see that video here. Otherwise, stay caffeinated, folks.